Hello everyone and welcome to One Teacher, One Scientist chat room. Today we have a young bubbly historian, Nanki Kaur. Nanki has done her master's in heritage conservation and site management. And now she's working in the Partition Museum of Amritsar. Hello Nanki and welcome to One Teacher, One Scientist.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here.
And Nanki, today I want to understand what is it that inspired you to take such a niche area, of heritage conservation and site management. What inspired you to get into this line?
So I've always been interested in history since my schooling began. I guess this was because I had such amazing teachers who kind of noticed that aspect in me and tried to bring that out while I was in school. And also I feel because my family itself is so interested in the study of the past, and particularly my mother. So I think growing up with those kind of values, I came to understand and appreciate history as well. And then, of course, I went on to complete my Bachelors Degree in History Honours from the Delhi University. And then I had the opportunity to intern at INTACH in Delhi. And so that really made me realize the importance of heritage and what heritage really is, and how important it is to pass it on to the next generation and to make them realize its importance and the need to preserve it.
So why do you think...
So that is what actually made me want to pursue a career and a path in heritage conservation.
So how do you think heritage and its conservation, like what sort of a role does heritage and the past really play in a person's life? How do you think it has, kind of impacted you?
So as I say, or as it's known, history has a very important part in a person, both in the community, a nation, as well as the person's personal identity. So, and heritage is a huge part of this, because anything we do, our culture is all part of heritage. The food we eat, the languages we speak, the clothes we wear, everything comes under heritage. Heritage is not only monuments, it's also these intangible values that we all carry as human beings, which make up heritage. And without heritage, a person's identity would be lost. A community's identity would be lost. So I think heritage has an important role to play in everyone's life.
So do you think it is advisable to not teach children history, or like not have a historical reference to teaching and learning in their early years? Nowadays many times people think that history or studying history is irrelevant in their primary classes. Do you agree with that? Because I personally feel that it's important for children to be connected to history. And maybe the way we are approaching the subject in school is something we need to look at, and not just do away with the subject as such. What do you think?
So I think teaching history at a primary level is important, because it really gives a base of understanding what you may learn later on in life. It gives you also, it inculcates this interest in many people of knowing the past, of learning the history. And if you don't learn history, if you don't know what happened in the past, you can't build on that and prevent things from happening in the future. You have to learn history, understand it, and then make sure you build a better future. So I think learning history at a primary age is definitely important, especially to give a push. And personally for me, if I had not been exposed to studying history in my primary years, I would to make me realize my love and passion for history, it would have taken longer, and maybe it wouldn't even have pushed me towards history then.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. For example, if we give importance to math and to languages years, why shouldn't history be given the same opportunity to help people understand their past? And it's not only a past of their nation or the community, it can also be linked to the past of their own families. And to introduce personal history in the study of history in school is also a way to make people realize the importance of history.
Yeah, true. So do you think things would have been different if you had not studied history in primary classes?
Perhaps, I guess, you never know. It may have been different because it could have impacted many things in my primary years. For example, I may not have been for example, if a subject is so close to your heart, especially at an age when you're not really interested in studies, or you really have to be pushed to study. So I feel like if you don't have your favorite subject around to motivate you to go to school and study, I think it would also have impacted my education, my primary education a bit, because I wouldn't have had history to push me and to make me look forward to studying in school. And of course, it wouldn't have given, maybe it would have taken me time to realize my passion for history, or perhaps the teachers I had at a primary level, if they weren't present and teaching me history, I may not have come to love history. So it all depends, but I feel like its importance is definitely there. Yes.
I mean, if you're not doing those subjects, you really don't understand the passion that lies within.
Exactly.
Because you're not exposed to it.
Exactly.
And maybe, studying it in depth in maybe middle school would have just made the journey a little more difficult and a little more boring to reach the middle school.
Definitely. And especially as most children or most teenagers view history as a boring subject. Primary level history to push you and to give you an understanding, it would even demotivate you further in middle school when you are primarily just learning about dates and facts.
Yeah,
so I think giving that, that push.
Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect, because many times people think that that history and science are two subjects that are just adding to the burden of the child in primary classes. But if you look at it from a child's perspective, somebody who's very interested in science or is very interested in history and culture, if he's not exposed to it in primary classes, he may just lose the zeal to, or the enthusiasm to even go to school. That's a very interesting point. So Nanki, how do you think museums are being used in India for education? Because I personally feel that we are not utilizing our museums enough. Museums being used in India, do you think they are not being used to their fullest potential?
I agree that even though museums have been in the country for many years, decades, I think the full capacity or the full use of a museum, people are only realizing it, I think, in the past 5 years or so. And I, like working in the museum sector, I have seen this change towards making use of museums to teach people, particularly children, and to increase museum activities or to explore other areas, interesting areas, which make museums more than what they were viewed as years ago, as a boring place where you just go look at old things. Working at the Partition Museum, we also have gone into educational programs for children, to particularly such a subject like partition, such a sensitive subject like partition. We've used the museum to kind of convey the emotions and the feelings that are attached to partition to children in a way that they wouldn't have been able to realize through their books, for example.
Right.
We've had children coming to the Partition Museum and actually stating this, that we've learned so much more by just visiting the museum than years of studying it in our books. Similarly, museums across the country who are slowly realizing this power they have, and they're making use of it. I mean, in or different places around, different museums around, they've been using their museum and their collection to reach out to children more often and in a better way. And I feel, although it's a new beginning for many of our museums in India, I think the future does look bright, because we have a lot of people who are passionate about it, who are working in museums, and I think that we all can hope and can work towards making museums more inclusive, more family friendly, and more of a place where people visit out of joy rather than being forced to visit it.
Right.
So I think hopefully India might see in the next few years or decades a kind of a museum culture coming up.
Oh, that's so nice. I'm sure it would be, because if young people like you are going to sort of get attached to museums and bring new energy into museumology and museum studies, I'm sure things will change. One thing I want to understand, if you had to choose between real world experiential learning and a virtual world learning, what would you choose?
Definitely real world. I mean, I've had the opportunity to learn through both mediums. Real life experience is so much more important. I mean, of course, you have to have theoretical education and you have to use digital platforms to maybe push that through. But I think visiting places physically and getting that kind of experience, real life experience, is equally important, and it can really push you towards understanding a subject more clearly.
Yeah, so definitely an experiential learning and real world context is so much more important to establish, I think, a human touch or a human value to the thing that you're studying.
Exactly.
And I think that goes for all the subjects, I would say.
Yes. You know, that practical experience that you get, the joy you actually feel when you apply something theoretical in a practical environment is something that is so special, and it's something which really motivates you to maybe study that subject or delve more into your passions.
What sort of a change do you think one can expect if children today do not study subjects like history, for example, in their primary years, and suddenly in grade 6 they are exposed to, or in middle school they start taking up history as a subject? What do you think one can expect in the next generation if something like this happens?
So personally, I feel that it would burden the children more. See, many might say that if you don't have it in primary years, you're actually taking off that burden. But the fact is that when you introduce something or many subjects in one go in a year, children are more burdened. For example, in class 11, when you get a whole set of new subjects, it's a very difficult situation for many children to adjust to all those new subjects, and they come to realize that studying in class 11 is a hard venture because of these new subjects. So I feel like if you suddenly introduce all these new subjects like history, science, and civics in, for example, middle school, it just puts that extra pressure on children who've never been exposed to those subjects before. So rather than you thinking that it'll actually take away the burden in younger years, I think introducing those subjects even at a base level in the primary years is much more useful and healthier for children. So I feel like if you take away that, you're going to see a lot more cases of children either not liking those subjects which they are introduced to in later years, or you're going to see a lot more problems regarding studies and stress and pressure on children, especially at such a young age in middle school, when it's not really required for that kind of stress to be present.
Yeah, and I think the transition is going to be very, very difficult.
Exactly. It's like, for me personally, I can say that when I shifted from one school to the other, the math system between CBSE and ICSE was so hard for me, and I was at such a young age, at class 5, and even at that age, having the same subject but in a different board system really threw me off.
So I don't think in the long run it would be such a great idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of it, that child can actually, children, I feel, are like sponges till they are about 7-8 years old, and you can just keep, exposing them to as much as you can and help them build those connections and everything. And maybe in later years it just becomes a little more difficult when all the neurons are already adjusted the way we want.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, apart from the educational aspect of it, I think making children understand the value of subjects like history is so much important at a younger age, when they are, like you say, like a sponge. So if you make them realize the importance of history, they might grow up to be better people, and much more understanding people. So I think it wouldn't be smart to take it away at a young age.
Yeah, and I think we can learn so much. Like, there's so much hidden in history. There are so many life lessons that are hidden in history, that if it's just that how we are approaching the subject might need to change, because maybe learning the dates and learning the names of rulers holds no relevance, but how a civilization has evolved, and what went through and what happened and why, maybe that can be the way that history could be approached.
Definitely. And I also think making use of museums, especially at a young age, to actually show children physically what they learn in a book, and showing it and going to a museum and showing them that aspect of, for example, that civilization, may increase more interest into the subject. So and also I think finding those links in for example, I think it's the role of the teachers to find that link between what you are teaching in class and in present day what you can link it to. And I think that really intrigues children, especially at a young age, to look at things differently, to perceive them in a historical context and using that historical context in their present day. So I feel like it's an amalgamation of how teachers can evolve the teaching of history, as well as introducing museums at a young age and using museums and their collections to teach history.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I just hope more and more children are using museums, and parents can actually use this. Even if schools are not able to take them to museums, perhaps parents could actually use museums as a very interesting outing, or a family bonding time, or a family trip. Museum visits and museum trips can actually be taken by families as a family outing, and that can help children probably even build their critical thinking.
Definitely. I feel like there is that kind of revolution required where both families as well as schools realize the importance of museums and how it can be turned into a family outing, or something that can actually give value to a child's life in their growing up years. So visiting amusement parks and malls is also required, but taking them to museums and making use of the new activities that museums are building now for children, I think it's an important place for children to go to. And especially, I think you can, depending on what museums in India do in the future, I feel like you can create museums as a hotspot for children as well. Like, for example, you can have specially designated rooms for children to do activities based around the museum's collection, while the parents go around and view the actual collections. So the museums also have to develop accordingly, I believe, in India. But we can start off by taking children to museums, by families having more interest in using museums to build their children's lives.
Yeah, so important. Thank you so much, Nanki, for sharing your insights. And I hope more and more millennials like you keep motivating children to take their learning forward in a more progressive manner, and not just sit and think of hardcore logical codings and stuff. There is life beyond, virtual reality and virtual world. I think a real world connection is something that we all need to take forward with our children.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for sharing your insights, Nanki. All the best.
Thank you.
All the best.